Hello. Monday morning technical issues are awesome. Awesome. I love I
Always.
swear I get like the firmware updates, and then I just like Teams is trying to update over there for the side conversation. StreamYard had some updates. Elgato's tools, like my lights wouldn't come on because they needed the firmware update, like everything all at once. So it's great to be on the road, come home, think everything's just ready. And
Well, happy Monday. Welcome to the Project Failure File.
yeah, exactly.
So this series is for anyone who manages projects for a living. Maybe you have the actual real life title of project manager. Maybe you got something else like operations manager, product manager. Maybe it's some made up title. Maybe you own your own business, which basically means you have manage everything. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I will explore what not to do as you manage projects. And in each episode of Project Failure Files, we'll talk about common pitfalls in project management. We'll share some personal stories and experiences and explore strategies and best practices to help you be successful. And we're also trying to condense this whole intro, which is always the plan. It's just we're speeding it up now. But so what not to do in project management, that is kind of our approach for the series, and lots to talk about.
So this is part 2. We made it a part 2 of our conversation about falling into the tool trap that we covered way back, like in episode 4.
I think it's 4, yeah.
So this is about finding the balance between technology and actual management skills.
I am excited.
We spent so long talking about it, we needed more time.
I know. We knew we would. There's a couple topics in our schedule that just we're not going to be able to cover it in 30, 40 minutes. We're going to need to do, go back to. And of course, please feel free, ask questions. We are monitoring. We'll try to add them in, live. We can discuss them. We have the ability to pull people on screen, which we've not yet done, Sharon. So we can do it. But if you have questions, if you have experiences, and we'll be sharing links, I'll be sharing other banners and things with how to get in touch with us and a place to comment. But you can comment, like we're tracking. I think this pulls in from YouTube and LinkedIn, does a pretty good job. Maybe Facebook and Twitter as well. But if we don't cover them during the series, during the episode, we'll of course follow up with you.
Okay, so where do we begin? I feel like the last time we spent the majority of our time talking about like background and sharing stories, and maybe this time we should focus a little bit more on maybe actionable strategies and some prevention tips and tricks.
Maybe. This is one of those things though, and again, for our backgrounds too, for anybody that's new, I mean, Sharon and I both have extensive backgrounds, spent a lot of time as project managers and kind of, multiple titles through that. I started as a tech writer and business analyst, moved over to a project management role and did that for a number of years, but then built project management organizations. A very common thread that I found with clients, with organizations, is that they had a tool and they changed everything they did, their process around what the tool could and couldn't do. And it was a common point of failure in process. I don't know if you had a similar experience with project management tools.
So many similar experiences. No, I agree. I think a lot of times, and I kind of, I mean, I say this seriously, but with a little bit of sarcasm in my tone, is that, we help businesses in my consulting firm, like we help businesses make the tools serve them instead of the other way around. Because I think sometimes what ends up happening is we say, we're going to implement this tool, right? And the tool then, like you said, defines the methodology, it defines the way we act, it defines the roles in the organization, it defines how we're going to do the work. And while I think for a place who needs that guidance, for a place who needs some sort of methodology to wrap around their organization, that's okay. But the minute that you make the tool the definition of how you're going to work, I think unless that's the decision that's been made up front, then what you've done is essentially you've taken all that hard work and defining who you are and what you do and how you work, and you've allowed the tool to make all those decisions for you.
Well, it's not just around the tools. I mean, this is a common project management problem in general. If you're going in, a couple scenarios here. One, you go in and if you've ever met with a client, if you internal or if you're a consultant or whatever it is, you probably had a similar experience. And they've said, and here's the technology we want to deploy. And you might just say, okay, they've already done some of the pre-work. I guarantee you they've not done the pre-work. They've not clearly defined what it is that we're actually looking for. What are we solving for? And so if you go back, I mean, just always validate.
Always.
It's like calling in for a help desk, and you know how they ask all those annoying calls as they're troubleshooting. They're going through their script, and they've got to ask all those fundamental questions like, I've done that. And like half the time they then ask another basic question. You're like, oh, I forgot to do that step. That's often what happens. Like they've selected a tool, even they've said they've done the work. You need to go validate that. They often, most of the time, do not, or have not done that work. And so going back and saying, okay, what are your actual requirements? Well, then this tool that you said you've selected actually doesn't answer your needs in these areas, and define that for them. Have that conversation. So it's almost like, Sharon, I don't know if you have experience like where you have a project that another consultant did or didn't do, failed on, that you then came in and they said, oh yeah, we've already done this. Do you just then start where that last consultant who failed left off?
Never. In fact, I've spoken on this many times. I have a couple of presentations around this, and I did actually have that real life experience of walking in and taking over a project where somebody had already done the early work, like you said, and they were like, oh no, we've already made this decision. And so we just like you to kind of button it up, right? Just finish it off, get it across the finish line, because they had already done the bulk of the work. And I said, okay. And I said, well, would you humor me? And can we just have a couple of meetings so that I understand? I just really want to understand what has been done so that when we get this across the finish line, I can help. And did a couple of meetings. I'm like, I just want to understand what's happening. And the more and more I kind of got into those meetings, the more I started finding out like, the tool you have actually is a good tool and it's the best in the business. And wait, what is it that you don't like about it? And come to find out that they just weren't educated on the tool. And there was like one or two little teeny tiny things that it didn't do for them that they really wanted to do. And I know this is going to shock you, but instead of spending the numbers of digits that they had budgeted to buy a whole brand new tool set, we ended up just being able to educate them on the tool that they had. We reached out to the product company, and said, hey, would you be willing to add these couple of things? They're like, yeah, to keep you as clients, we'd absolutely be happy to do that. And the cost difference was staggering. I mean, we're talking about, it was, I think the original budget, was in the million range, and the final output was definitely not. And there was a significant savings. And on top of that, there was some consistency that stayed in their processes because we didn't have to go through the change management process of switching tools. But right. At the end of the day, I think this is, it's a lesson that I learned early on in number one, make sure to always go back and get your own information. Don't believe what everybody tells you. It could be right, but it also could be wrong. But second of all, oftentimes the decisions that we make around tools are not in line with what we actually need. We're easily sold on technology solving all of our problems. We're easily sold on another tool is better. We're easily sold on, this tool isn't doing what we want it to do, so we're just going to throw it in the trash. And I think oftentimes it's really about, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your problem? And could you simply review those gaps and improve those gaps in a way that, would solve everything, instead of looking directly at the tool to, be the hero of the day.
Well, I think again it goes back to understanding the scope. Like, what does a business actually need as part of that? What is that? The current state, future state, doing that design, having those discussions. This kind of comes down to kind of a broader theme around most of the topics we're covering, which is, if you have an organization that is attuned to and able to manage change quickly, so identify changes and adapt that, roll that out very quickly. This fits into that. If you have it could be an outdated tool technology, it no longer fits the need. Maybe it was a purely on-prem, it's more, half of it's paper-based. Yeah, go out, do the analysis of the various solutions that are out there. I always recommend, go and talk to practitioners. I share this story. I was doing a deployment, was doing a number of things for a very large client back in 2005. And one of the things that they wanted was project server. I'm like, why project servers? Like, well, we're a Microsoft shop and go and do it. I'm like, okay. Coming from that space, I said, here's 2 or 3 other solutions out there. Yes, they're more expensive, but they're demonstrated. They can go and do it. And I got on the horn, not to beat up on Microsoft. This was 2005 anyway, but I said, do you have some customer references? And they gave me 2 or 3. I called all of them. The biggest deployment in that year was Coca-Cola. So I talked with that team. I ended up hiring the consulting team that they used, the external team, to deploy theirs, to deploy ours. And so what was great about that, and I know that Microsoft wanted it to be this, cherry on top, perfect, here's a great client to go and talk to about this. Oh, they painted a realistic view of what they were actually able to do with the technology and not. And so I was able to validate a lot of what they came up with, and that helped with our deployment on the other side, and the things that didn't work for them also didn't work for us. Shocking. Yeah. But so going and following up those references, talking to actual customers, not just relying on the marketing and sales material, is key. I mean, I know that sounds like a no duh thing.
What?
I know, but it's shocking how many companies don't go and do that. And so then they fall into the tool trap that they're then they're sold on this, and the features aren't yet there. Oh, this was something I think we started talking about last time. I know we've talked about it a few other times, but building based on what's in the roadmap versus what's actually available in that product is another problem. And I know that's technology in general. That's just something that, if you are running a business, if you are responsible for what's happening today, you have to be very careful with buying into a roadmap that's not yet there. We're working on it. Should be the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Really? A year or 2 later, you might still be waiting for those key features.
Well, and if that lines up with your implementation, I think you're okay. And if the feature has been deployed in time for you to do something, I think that makes sense. But yeah, if you're like, oh yeah, we're doing this, but that feature's coming in a year. Yeah, sometimes that can be difficult.
Well, the other side of this too, I don't think we got into, was just having the tools that are out there that do all things. And you touched on this, that are underutilized. And that's a huge problem as well, because most deployments don't fail on the technology deployment. They fail in lack of training and the adaptation into the culture of the organization.
In fact, I'm getting ready to go talk about this afternoon to do a show for Microsoft, talking about Copilot readiness and what you can do to make sure that deploying something new in your organization sticks.
Yeah, this is again to go in and hopefully organizations, small or large, things that I do is I ask about, like, well, what is the adoption strategy as part of the rollout? And it's
Hmm.
ongoing. It doesn't end. It's like the updates that happen, whether it's quarterly or, I mean, I would never say annually, but monthly or quarterly that you're doing trainings. What does the education model look like for each of the key users of that? And then monitoring and providing, allowing people to provide feedback into that. I mean, as consultants, you would never just go and flip the switch. It's now on, and good luck with that, and back away. There's going to be built into that model, fees around it, yes, but to come back in and review and look at the questions, make modifications, make adjustments. But then again, talk about, hey, here's, you fill in the gaps by, clearly we have training needs here. People aren't using it, or they're using it in the wrong way. And slowly changing that culture so that you get the most out of technology, because that's what digital transformation. I know that's passe. We don't use that phrase anymore. It was a few years back, but that's the thing most people got wrong about digital transformation. It's not just upgrading to the latest technology. Digital transformation could be leveraging technology that you installed 5 years ago, but getting the most out of it.
In fact, I think we see that more. I mean, I'm not saying we don't deploy things, but and we definitely heavily recommend that you invest in the services, the support, the training around it. Not everybody always listens to that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I think a lot of times people invest in tools and they don't even know why they invest in them. Somebody saw value in it, but nobody else caught the vision of what that value was. And I always go back to, everything that we ever do is, what problem are you trying to solve? And I think a lot of times we bought a tool is not the same as we're solving a problem or filling a gap or providing value. And so a lot of people in the organization, especially in project management, are like, yay, another tool I have to learn. They're like, why can't I just use the one I know? Why can't I use the one that's working? What is it that this is going to give me that's so much better that I've put all that effort into it? And we think about even like, when we think in project management, there's so many things that have to be filled in. We have to fill in tasks, we have to fill in resources, we have to fill in costs, we have to fill in scope, we have to fill in milestones. Like there's so many things that have to be filled into a tool like that, that I think what happens is we're like, hey, we've got this amazing tool. It's going to help you to be a better project manager. It's going to be better in, doing your tasks. It'll be better in tracking your effort. It's going to be better in understanding how many resources we need. But at the end of the day, all that people see day to day is it's going to be more work. It's going to be more effort for me. It's going to be more, more change, more learning, more whatever. And I think some of the thing that doesn't happen is we don't use the better tools because people don't want to put that effort in. They don't want to learn. They don't want to change. And I think that's a struggle in a lot of organizations.
Well, and I would say that's also needs to be part of that planning process. You have those discussions. Again, cultural aspects of change are hard. It's really difficult to get those things to go and stick. And so it's about being clear on, here's the value. Here's the value to each of those roles. Because you're exactly right. It's, having been project managers, like the thing I hated the most was chasing people to update statuses on things. Whether I was building the project and I'm just trying to get an update, like what actually happened with these tasks that are outstanding. When you automate it, it didn't get any better, that process. And unfortunately, there's another failure of the technology if it's not incorporated into the way that people work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would get to, like, I remember having this discussion with the director. We were every Friday going through the same motion of I was having to chase people down to go enter hours and projects and estimates on things. And it's like, okay, you had this task that was the ETA was today. Never put an ETA on a Friday if you can avoid it, if you want it to be believable. But it was going to be done today. You were, last time I talked to you 2 weeks ago about it, you were 85% complete. Yeah, it's like 90% complete. I'm like, okay, based on what? Like, you're just throwing stuff out there. Like, there's no,
it's sitting in an open tab on my monitor right now. That makes it 90%. I just need to finish it and click the button.
Right. Why don't I just give you a blank check for your salary? Let's just to make it convenient. You tell me how many hours it's actually going to take. Yeah. So to change to where that's kind of captured in the process of. And I mean,
Mhm.
some organizations, I mean, I don't want to get into like salary versus hourly and around some of these tasks, but those are things that you have to think about. I mean, it's always half my orgs have always been, I've got contract employees and
Mhm.
I'm constantly, going there and following that. What are you actually working on? What is this going to take around those things? That's the role of the PM.
Mhm.
Um, but you need to figure out a process, a way of doing that. And one way for contractors was a daily tally of, like in the morning, I knew, okay, here's what I'm doing each day. At the end, here's what they've actually, they've accomplished, and here's
Right.
the hours that it took, and for the projects they're working on.
Yeah.
So it have conversations about how will this actually work? How will this change the way that you're doing it? It's like any new technology, there's the community management aspect of it. I use that example, Sharon. I know we've talked about this a lot, but when you roll out a new like online community, whatever it is, it's community building and getting people engaged and involved. Um, uh, like we've rolled out social tools like formerly known as Yammer, now Microsoft Engage, but like the social components of that. You can't just turn it on and expect people to be in there and active. You'll often see people going and having a conversation. There's a thread in email, and you have to redirect them. Hey, this needs to be over in Engage or in
Mhm.
Teams or in
Mhm.
this place. It's not like you're not slapping their hand,
No.
and yelling at them for that,
Yeah.
but there's a redirect of
Yeah.
that old behavior towards the
Hey,
new.
there's a line over here. It's the right place.
And you need to do the same thing. It's like, come on,
Mhm.
everybody. It's like, I know I'm a broken record on this, but here's what we're doing here, and this is why we need this information, and then be able to go back and show them the updated stats and how on top of things that we are. I mean, I've managed teams where we then got, put on a pedestal as hey, look, and Christian's team was able to go and do this, and look at the cool stats and the data that's out of that. It was only possible because they followed the process.
So what you're saying is that the tool won't do the work for us?
Yeah,
I
the
okay,
tool is less relevant. It could be an Excel spreadsheet that you're using for time tracking. It's the process, it's the education, it's changing the culture of how things work. That is what I mean, that's how you avoid the tool trap.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I definitely think, I mean, and right now, I know AI is the buzz right now, and oh,
What?
it's
I
gonna
haven't
help
heard that.
you.
Wow.
I
What?
I know it's brand new, right? And I think there's, all of the new tools, we talk about all these new AI assistants, and oh, well, they're gonna automate everything. And I think, to your point, within a process, they will make things faster, better, more efficient, easier, but they're still not going to do it for you. They're still not going to make those decisions for you. They're still not going to, there's still a human element that has to be involved. And I think, if there is one large thing to think of the tool trap, it's the idea that the tool is going to act on your behalf. And I just think that's silly, to even make that expectation.
You can't avoid talking to people, Sharon. You
I
have to
mean, you
have those
can,
conversations. Well, not I
but
know, shouldn't avoid talking to people, right? Well, but this goes back again, some of the fundamentals of having like, what are the feedback loops on that we've got this new technology? And I've been in, and I think we've all been in trainings, rollout of new technology. You've gone in if you've worked for a larger corporation, especially they do this, and where some of the learning department, the trainers that are brought in around that do a really good job of, what questions do you have? I know that I just came back from speaking at a conference. I was over in Minnesota, and one of the best parts of presenting, it's like I've got my content. I'm a subject matter expert in this area, but I love the questions because then that helps me identify where are the gaps in my thinking in the technology that's there, and hopefully I can answer that, and it's an education thing. And there's always, with one person asks a question, there's it's like one to five other people have that same question and just didn't
Mhm.
raise their hand. And so having feedback loops as part of this, an important key part of this process on a new deployment, to make sure that, and then modifying. I was going to say earlier, I went the social route because one of my favorite tools is having an FAQ out there. I love using social tools like Engage, Yammer as a tool, but having a knowledge base where you are entering every question asked and with that answer. If somebody's asking a question that's already been asked, then you're pointing them to the answer to that question in the tool. And so part of that is you're training people, one, to ask more questions, and they'll ask more if they're getting answers, and being as responsive as possible there. But that then becomes an ongoing asset the next time you turn around. You're developing a repeatable process the next time you're deploying a tool, is if you're following that same framework.
And you know that the right answers are going out consistently because you're pointing them to the same information as opposed to it being different every time.
Yeah. That's it. And I threw in some other kind of side topics here, like the topic of remote work comes up around this. And I think it's becoming less and less relevant just because most organizations are hybrid these days.
Well, it's becoming more normal. I mean, I remember many years ago, and I know we've even had this conversation many years ago, is, why can't people just be okay with this? Like, it's a thing, there's software that allows you to do that. There's this thing called the cloud that allows you to have that ability. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it's become far more common for most workers and most companies now to be okay with that. So now I think modern work is becoming current work.
Yeah. It's funny. So much of the focus of my career really since 97, right, with my own startup that I did, was working on nights and weekends while working full time. But I've been developing, collaboration technology. Like we had our own chat module. We did, web meeting. We did like net meeting integration back in 98, I believe. And then went on and did other VC funded projects and building out this collaboration technology. And it was, so my observation in, I think it was 2008 while at Microsoft was I keep working for these companies building this collaboration technology, and all of them refuse to allow people to work from home, work remotely, use our own technology. Yeah.
Yep. No, I saw it all over the place too. I mean, I saw companies who were really, full ahead, like shouting from the rooftops how innovative they were because they were, adding this stuff to their operations, and yet many of the people were not allowed to use it. And that's always been a struggle. And I mean, it's always the fine line between, security and governance and tool adoption. And I think that is a big issue that a lot of companies face, is that they want to be innovative and they want to be modern and they want to offer, these really cool tools for people to be able to do better at what they do. But there's always that, risk threshold of security and governance that kind of plays into there, and things, events that have happened over, especially like the last year or so with, security events that have been happening. I think, people are starting to kind of back off a little bit and lock down and be like, okay, what are ways that we can be secure and have good governance, but also allow our workers to have the best of breed software and the best of breed opportunities to be able to collaborate and communicate in a modern way.
Yeah. Well, I think most of the tools that you see are, cloud-based now. So they enable that, pure, cloud or hybrid experience. But I think it goes back to, that's why I made the comment. I wasn't trying to be flippant with like, it's not really that important now for hybrid anymore, but it does come down to the same basics of what are the feedback loops. If I'm 100% remote. I've been remote as an employee, as a consultant, since I left Microsoft in 2009. I just have always been, well, I guess for a while I had the office in downtown Seattle, but it was often the only one in the office. But having those feedback loops of, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not, and then providing good feedback of here's why this is not working. Like I would go, I'm just it's the way that I work. If I'm using the tool and this is a tool that's the preferred solution, this is how I got into working with ISVs, working with the tool vendors, because using these technologies and being out there, giving it that real world stress test and providing that feedback, like, here's the expected I can't figure out how to do this. This is what's difficult. I'm having to duplicate work. Like, double entry accounting was like my least favorite thing in grad school, doing the finance and accounting classes. Like, why? We've got software that does this stuff now.
Right.
But providing that feedback, is so critical. But again, it's just kind of a rule of thumb. If you're not then providing a status on that feedback, then people will stop. The feedback will dry up.
Yeah.
So you have to have those feedback loops.
Yeah. You don't want it to go nowhere. You definitely want there to be action taken on that, and you want them to feel like they were heard.
Have you also, thought about, like, or ever utilized metrics for tracking the success of the technology in your org? Like, I mean, I've seen like general surveys, my team at Microsoft and other companies, since then, where my team or myself, I manage the internal as well as partner and customer feedback, like the annual survey, the pulse survey mid-year. Around that, we'd always ask internally about questions around the tools, but it was always high level. It wasn't specific, and I don't recall there ever being metrics around tracking around the effectiveness of the technology. So somehow incorporating that feedback, and the performance of those tools. Like, we talk about it in the customer, so the solutions themselves, but to say, like, how many tickets did we have open in the year, or one of our goals is to reduce the number of tickets by improving the quality of this solution. Like, have you done that for like your PM tools?
Yeah. So, I mean, for PM and other tools, I've done Six Sigma projects around that, and I've done client work around that. I did a really nice Six Sigma project where basically we were trying to prove the value of needing to switch a tool. And it's kind of a similar thing where the tool that they had, which really wasn't a tool, they had kind of a kludgy homespun way of doing things, and they were wanting to move to a better tool, and so we did exactly that. So we did some what is the value we're trying to achieve. We did some surveys, we did some testing, we did some different ways to get metrics. And I think the biggest thing is, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Back to that, what problem are you trying to solve, and does the tool you have solve the problem that you think it's solving? And so we did some baseline surveys where we basically had people test, I want you to do this test case, and I want you to track how much time it took you, and then kind of what your level of frustration was with the time that you're doing this, and then do you have any other comments? And so we did this baseline test with the way that they were. We then took a pilot group and we rolled out the tool, and we gave them training and all of that on it. And then a little bit later, we went back and we did another round of testing and said, okay, we're going to do the exact same use case test that we did previously. We're going to do it again. And it gave us some really valuable insights, because ultimately we were testing the exact same task. Can you do this? How do you feel about it? How long does it take you? And what we noticed is, like, at the beginning, it was like our results were like, it took them, on average over 10 minutes to find what they were looking for and accomplish the task. And most of them were very frustrated, and half of the people gave up because they were just like, no, I don't want to do this. After we implemented the tool, it was like, they found things in, less than a minute. They were very happy with it. They were able to achieve the task they were trying to accomplish. And that gave us some really great insights into, the tool is doing its job, because ultimately it's solving the problem. It's making people feel good about it. They're getting their tasks done. And so I took that lesson learned early on in that project to then go into my clients. And anytime my clients were like, hey, we want to know, are the tools we're using successful? Are we getting the value out of the tool? Are we, implementing this properly? Whatever. Now I can say reliably, based on this past project, if you kind of do some baseline metrics around what it is you're trying to accomplish, gather that information, and then however often you want to do it, maybe right after you implement it, maybe a little bit down the road, to see not only is it better, but is it continuing to improve that problem that you were trying to solve. You can see the metrics of what that tool change did. And then if you really want to drill in and get super specific, you can say, or what are the things that we did to implement the tool, and start doing surveys around those steps too. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really valuable for organizations to understand, because a lot of times, like you said, we turn tools on, we turn tools off. We don't care. Like, are they using them? Are they not using them? And 9 times out of 10, we only change if somebody's screaming because they're in pain. They either, the tool they have is wasting their time and frustrating them, or they don't have what they need. We don't think about those subtle kind of in between values beyond that.
Well, and part of that too is, I was going to make the comment. It's like, for a lot of what you're talking about, like I've certainly seen this in large enterprise organizations. I've worked for big companies. They go in, they're constantly looking, and they may even have teams that are looking at the, insights and analytics out of usage of all the different tools. And like I had a great interview in the Collab Talk podcast with Christy Hissa over at Kairos, is great, talking about meeting performance. And so they provide consulting and solutions around helping large organizations that realize that we're really bad at meetings to go in and look at that, analyze the data. It's like, well, why, what is missing from this process? It's, for small organizations that are thinking, look, we're not going to be doing an employee survey. There's 20 of us, here, but there's still value in tracking, looking at, here's the tools that we're using, and there's pain points, and having conversations around, here's how we're using this. Because part of growing an organization is looking at the efficiencies around those, and how can we better leverage technology? How can we do more with less, which means fewer people doing more? How can we scale this and grow? Or how can we say yes to a large project that's 4 times the size of any project we've done as a company before, but confidently say yes because we know we've got the tools, the technology, and the expertise to go and do that. But you need to have a process around this. It's funny, I always use the word process, and most people think bureaucracy around it. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a it's a systematic approach to problem solving. And it's the understand the scope, ask questions about it up front, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What do we think the end state looks like? And that view of the end state will evolve and change based on the tools, but they're not led by or determined by the tools that you use. So we started out with this conversation. It's like the organizations that will change all their process because this is the way that the tool requires you to input and read things. Like, no, that's not acceptable. You picked the wrong tool, probably.
I mean, I think if it helps you define that process, and it aligns with where you want to go, that makes sense. But I think if it dictates what you do and you don't have that defined, and it doesn't match up with you, or it doesn't align, then it is a problem.
Yeah. Well, I know we've kind of covered a lot of ground here, and where we jumped in halfway. For those that missed the beginning of it, like, if you go back to episode 4, and everything's out on YouTube, you can go find the past recordings, or you could find them out on buckleyplanet.com, because Sharon's not yet sharing in her blog any of what we're talking about here. I'm just saying.
I should probably add that to my list.
But anyway, you go find that kind of for the first half, where we went through kind of the definition and talked more about the cultural issues of this. But to summarize, to go in and have a process in place that you are looking at any technology, define the current state, define what you want the future state to be, what are the gaps in between. And then it's the tools should help you solve for that future state, as well as the gaps to help you get to that future state. And so you don't want to just go and turn on every feature that the new tool does. When you turn on new technology, if it can as closely match what the existing culture is, the way that we do things, so that as you introduce new features and capabilities and slowly move people will move with that change. If it's too much change too quickly, people will just inherently push back against that.
Mhm.
But then also, go in there, have the feedback loops regularly, ask for feedback. In fact, every engagement, every training, and ask people, it's like, well, what's not making sense, or look where people are making mistakes with the tools and say, well, clearly there's an opportunity for training there. But that's ongoing, to look at the metrics around the usage metrics, the feedback metrics, just like any product company does. You look at what are we going to do next based on what are people saying about the product today that they're buying. It's the exact same model, and you add features or you look for other future tools to use based on that feedback if you know that you're exceeding the scope of what you have today. But that should just be part of your operational model for managing change.
Yeah, I want to, like, I know you mentioned this a few minutes ago, but I want to call back on this again, because I think a lot of people say, well, we don't need that because we're too small, we're too big, we're too this, we're too that. Everybody's unique. They all have their own issues, right? But I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I know who you are, and wherever you're at, like, this goes back, and I'm going to like do a little call out to the maturity model, is that whether you're talking about the lean maturity model for M365, whatever maturity model you follow, the idea is that no matter where you're at, no matter how big you are, how small you are, how many employees you have, it's knowing where you're at in that maturity life cycle and understanding what your needs are at that level, so that you can make sure that you are taking some of the feedback from this and identifying the tools that you do need to be using, use them properly, get the most out of them, discard the tools that are extra that you're not getting value out of, and streamline it so that, just like any other process, it is as lean and efficient as possible. You're getting the most value and the most, what you need out of it for the least amount of, frustration and change and work that you possibly can. And I think if you look at it from a maturity perspective and not from a tool or not tool perspective, then you'll align what you need in your process, in your day-to-day work, with the right tool set, and you'll find that you're far more successful.
Yeah. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of the maturity model as well, because a lot of people ask, like, well, what for a company in my size, or I mean, it's the maturity models are generally blind to the size of the organization and just more of where you are, because you could have very sophisticated small organizations
Mm-hmm.
and very rudimentary large enterprises as well. And but just it gives you an idea, and some of them do provide kind of industry specific guidance, but of what kind of that standard is to move up to that next area. You have a path, and hey, here's the next thing. And then you be the judge of, your organization, your users, your management team. Hey, we're not ready to make that move. There's other changes that we have to make to be ready for that. So
Yes.
that's a great place to leave this. I know it's a lot. It's always a lot to cover in one of these sessions. But that's it for this week's episode. Again, go take a look at episode 4 for the other half of this. And I know in the blog post, I'll link to both. But for those that aren't yet following us, please go follow us out on X. Of course, you can find us, search on our names, and my Buckley Planet. I'll explain again where that came from in a future episode. But yeah, it was a joke, and then it stuck. But yeah, you can find us pretty much anywhere across the social platforms. If you go out to YouTube on my Buckley Planet account, you can find all of the past episodes again for Project Failure files. And then we highly encourage you, if you've not yet, go and join the community over on Facebook. Like, I'm using Facebook less and less, except for the communities that are on there. There's about a dozen that I'm in every other day. So you can ask questions there. You can share stories that might make an episode later. So yeah, lots to talk about here. And so we are, and I guess the last thing I'll say is that we'll be back next Monday, every Monday, into I think we have, seriously, folks,
Forever.
3 years of
Just
content
forever.
planned. That's in the plan. So weekly for the next 2.5, almost 3 years. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific, right here. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for coming. See you next time.
I guess I should always have this thing ready to go. It wasn't ready. Now it's ready. All right. We'll see you later, Sharon.